highly social in that it believes in the government should protect and take care of people. And now moving to capitalism is changing. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying it's changing. But 1974 was the year I came back. I got out of the Marine Corps after 5 years as a pilot in the Marine Corps. And I went to my dad. And as I said before, I asked him, what should I do with the rest of my life? And my dad said, go back to school, get your master's, get your PhD, and get a job with the government. And I went, oh my God. So at that point, I went to Waikiki to see my rich dad, and I said, what should I recommend? But the saddest thing about 1974 when I talked to my poor dad was very simply, my poor dad in 1974 was saying, go back to school with my PhD so I could get a safe, secure job. And my dad was unemployed. He was about, 1974, he was about 50 years old. And the reason he was unemployed, like I said before, he ran for lieutenant governor against his boss, the governor. And the governor said to my dad, you will never work in this state again. In other words, you will never get a job here. So here's my dad. He did all the right things except stand up for his conscience and run against a corrupt government. And at that point, he never got a job again. So that's why at that point I knew I'd better listen to my rich dad. And I went to see my rich dad, and I went to see him, and I said, I want to follow in your footsteps, not my poor dad's footsteps, and I want to be an entrepreneur and an investor. In other words, I didn't want to go over here with my PhD. I just wanted to come over here. So he said, I said, I'll be an entrepreneur. The first thing he said to me, he says, if you're going to be rich, you're going to be an entrepreneur, you must learn how to sell. And that was my first real awakening to the real world. He says, if you can't sell, you'll never be an entrepreneur. He says, that's what entrepreneurs are doing all the time. And I had this really negative block because my family, being school teachers, thought that salesmen were the scum of the earth. I had to go against my family's biases about salespeople, and I got a job with Xerox, and for 2 years I was the worst salesman Xerox had, and then 4 years later I was #1 in sales and things like this, so I learned that. But that's why 1974 was so important to me. But even on the world scheme, 1974 was important because that was the introduction of a thing called ERISA. And ERISA stands for Employee Retirement Income Security Act, which led to, back a few years later, to a thing we now know as a 401k. This came out about 1980, so 74 to transition to that. And I think the primary reason I do this Teach to Be Rich and all this stuff, and I created the Rich Dad Company, is because of this act over here. It is one of the biggest changes that we have had in the world today, but very few people have taken notice of it. Because the 401k is a very significant little investment type of vehicle. The reason the 401k is so important is because it is probably the riskiest of all investment vehicles. You know, your banker won't lend you money for it. You can't get insurance on it. And not only that, it only will work for about 20% of the population. If you're making less than $150,000 a year, it is doubtful whether the 401k will provide enough income for you when you need it. So the reason the 401k in 1974 is so significant is that why this is important, like I said, was the shift from socialism to capitalism, 1974. But what it signified was this, was that the companies, the big corporations, were no longer going to take care of the employees. That's what it meant. Up until this point, my poor dad had the right idea. Go to school, and the company and the government will take care of you. 74 was so important because basically the big corporations were saying, employees are too expensive, we're not going to take care of anymore. So we're not going to protect the employee. So the employee suddenly had to come from here to over here as passive investors. And they have no financial education, which is really why I'm upset with the school system, because even though the world changed, our school system still teaches us very little about money. And I always say, you know, rich or poor, smart or not so smart, we're all going to use money, so why doesn't the school system teach something about money? But even though the 74 change happened here, nothing happened. And that's, like I say, well, how many years is that? 25, 30 years ago that change happened. Our schools still do not teach us anything about money. But this is what's happening in America today. USA Today did a survey, and they found Americans' greatest fear is running out of money during retirement. And that fear is now caused by this 1974 change, because people now realize that a 401k is not a pension. A 401k is now a savings plan. And the difference between a pension and a savings plan is this, is pensions will take care of you for your rest of your life. A savings plan will only take care of you as long as you have money in the account. So that's why USA Today found the greatest fear is that. Then the Fox network did the same survey. They wanted to find out what the greatest fear was. It said, is terrorism a greatest fear or retirement a greatest fear? And what Fox found out, these are approximate numbers, Fox News, they found out that about 22% or 26% thought that terrorism, Al-Qaeda, was the greatest fear. 60% thought that running out of money was the greatest fear during retirement. And the reason that is happening, again, for this change right here. And so that's why I created this book, Teach to be Rich here, and all this, is because there are millions of people who are afraid of running out of money during retirement because our schools haven't picked up the slack of the change of 1974. I believe it is this law change that the reason I created Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the Rich Dad Company, the cash flow games. And in the year 2002, I wrote this book here called Rich Dad's Prophecy. How many people have read this book here? Good, a lot of you have. It's not as popular. This was not a very popular book because this book was written about the 1974 change. And all of my predictions in this book, many Wall Street companies came after me. Many magazines came after me. They absolutely trashed this book. They called me a quack. I didn't know what I was talking about. But it is, I think, not the most popular book, but the single most important book for many people. So, again, this was 2002. And then in 2005, 3 years later, the New York Times says the same thing that prophecy says. Exactly the same thing. So this is 2002, this is 2005, and it says here, we regret to inform you that you no longer have a pension. That basically what they're saying is that these people after 1974, pension plans became one of the biggest sources of funds for the rich. They just take money out of it, and the middle class and the people who put money in there don't get anything inside of it. So this is the New York Times, October 30th, 2005. Then October 31st, 2005, Time magazine said the same thing. It says, the great retirement ripoff. Again, saying the same thing my book in prophecy said 3 years earlier. And it says here, millions of Americans who think they will retire with benefits are in for a nasty surprise. How corporations are picking people's pockets with the help of Congress. That's what these articles are about here. So they say the same thing prophecy says here. This is 2005, this is 2002. So that's why I created this product here, Teach to be Rich, and my cash flow games, is because of this right here. Because what has happened in the world is so many people then, because of 1974, were forced to become passive investors. And I'd like to show you on the screen what the difference between a passive investor is and an active investor. So number one, a passive investor, one, they have no control. And this whole talk is about control. The next segment, I'll go into what control really is. Next is higher risk. They invest in the highest of risk investments. The highest risk investments are savings, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. They're the riskiest of all investments, but most people think they're safe for some reason. And you'll find out today that they're the riskiest. Number three, the banker will not lend you money for your 401k or mutual funds. If your banker doesn't trust them, why should you? That's the test. Don't believe my word, ask the banker. Number four, insurance agents will not insure your 401k against losses. As a real estate investor, I'm not pushing real estate, I had one of my buildings burned. Thank God nobody was hurt, but the insurance company replaced it and replaced my rent and all this. I never invest without insurance, but millions of people, due to that 1974 change, moved over here as passive investors. They have no insurance, and they're putting their money into investments a banker would not touch. Number 4 or 5. Higher taxes. The 401k is one of the least tax efficient of all investment vehicles. 401ks only work if you're planning on being poor when you retire. The reason I don't have a 401k is I plan on being rich when I retire. Because when I put money into my 401k, when I retire, let's say at age 65, when I pull the money out, it comes pulling out as ordinary income. If I have a lot of money, ordinary income is one of the most highest taxed of all incomes there is. It doesn't make any sense for me because I make so much money, I might be paying 40, 50% tax on that money. I'd rather be in real estate where I can pay 0 tax. That makes more sense to me. So that's why I don't have a 401k. And this is all part of the financial education I think they should tell kids early so they don't take a job with a 401k and do something else. Number 6, they always worry about market crashes. You know, they're always worried about it, and they're always asking their financial planner, you know, what do you see in the future? You know, the stock's going up, stock's going down, prices coming up, prices going down. You know, that's gambling. That's not what I do. Number 7 is they have very low returns. This book, Unconventional Success, is written by a man named David F. Swenson. If you don't take my word for it, take his word for it. He's a chief investment officer for a company called Yale University. This guy's a very smart guy. It's a great book. But he says this, that mutual funds have not done any returns over the long term. The reason I'll go into a little later on, the reason mutual funds have not had high returns is because the fees they take out of them. I'll be going into that a little later. So if you insist on investing in paper assets, I would buy this book here because it's a great book. But he goes into why investing for the long term in mutual funds absolutely makes no sense, even over the long haul, because there's almost zero returns in them. Not zero, but very low returns. Number 8, the plan can run out of money. As I said, the problem with the 401k, it is not a pension plan, it is a savings plan. Number 9, you may never retire with a 401k. As I said, the 401k might work for about 20% of the people. As long as you're making over about $150,000 a year, it will not work for those making less than that because you just can't put enough money aside. And that's one of the problems with that. So those are some of the challenges. And what I'll show you the comparison now is between an active investor and what makes an active investor different is that an active investor, number 1, has control. That is the whole crux of this course here. Financial education, financial information means you're taking back control. What people are doing is right now, they're going around saying, I got $25,000, what should I do with it? What should I do with it? You know, they don't have any control. Number 2, they're a lower risk, and I'll go into why the risks are lower if you're a passive investor. Number 3, I use my bank's money, OPM. One of the ways you get rich faster is don't use your money, use somebody else's. Number 4, I use insurance. I don't invest without insurance. I have to have some kind of escape valve in there in case I'm wrong. Number 5, I may pay 0 taxes. One of the reasons I love real estate is I got the biggest tax breaks, and it's fabulous. I mean, I can make millions of dollars and pay 0 in taxes, or at least defer. Number 6, I welcome market crashes. Most people are afraid of market crashes. Like, I can't wait for the next market crash because that's when I'm going to buy again. The passive investor lives in fear of crashes. Number 7, there's unlimited returns, and I'll show you a couple examples where I get infinite returns. Number 8 is that I can provide for generations because my wealth is just constantly recurring. I can pass it on for kids, all this stuff. Number 9, I may retire early, and I retired at age 47 because I had financial education and no job. And so those are some of the differences right now. So with that, I'd first like to bring up Scott and Michael come up. Michael's my attorney. He's the author of OPM, Other People's Money. And Scott McPherson and I did this tape, is How to Get Your Banker to Say Yes. So Michael, would you give a little bit of background on this book here real quickly?
Question for you. You find a great deal. In order to get into that deal, you need $1 million. You don't have $1 million. What are you going to do? Do you walk away from the deal? The answer is a resounding no. You use other people's money. There are lots of different forms of other people's money. Scott will talk about some of them. There are different requirements for the different forms of other people's money. Some of them, different types of other people's money will be more applicable to different types of deals. This book is about that. Now, when you bring in other people's money, do you necessarily have to give away the store? There will be a cost. Okay? Again, the answer is a resounding no.
Okay.
Okay.
So the point here is this, is one of the skills I had to learn as a young man was how to raise capital. It became one of the most important skills. So many times people say to me, well, I can't afford it. They find these great deals, but they go, I can't afford it. Rather than say, how can I raise the money. So one of the things that makes the rich richer is I don't use my own money, I use other people's money. Or as my rich dad said to me, he says that only lazy people use their own money. So when somebody says, well, when do you use your own money? The only time I use my own money is when the deal is so good, I don't want anybody else in it. When the deal is shaky, I use other people's money. That's generally the rule of thumb there.
Now,
right?
Nobody is saying that money is going to magically appear. But we will tell you that if it is a good deal, you can always find the money.
Even if it's a bad deal, sometimes you can find money. So,
this is true.
Yeah, thank you. And so Scott McPherson is my banker. Anytime I have any questions on how to raise money or on especially real estate, I mean, this is my man. He is my banker, and he and I did this CD audio program is how to get your banker to say yes. But before you go talk to the audience here is, as a banker, do you lend money for mutual funds?
I do not.
Why not?
The primary reason, and you hit it on your screen just a second ago, is lack of control and too speculative and too much of a risk. And if I could, Robert, for just a second,
sure,
I'd like to show you an interesting scenario. In this particular case, it doesn't matter if it's a single-family home or an income-producing property, where we place a loan on the asset, we may loan 80, 90, 70%, maybe 100% of the value of that asset. Because it's a tangible asset, it makes sense, there's income and cash flow. For example, let's just say I'm the bank at that point. However, if you were to go buy my stock and I'm the bank, and you were trying to borrow money to buy that stock, you may be able to get 50%, maybe on a margin account to buy the stock of the bank that just loaned 80 or 90 or 100% on that single family home or whatever the asset was. So the difference is, in my mind, is you have something that has cash flow and control and a manageable risk that you can wrap your hands around going back to my stock, which I'm the one who loaned the money over here, but if you were to buy my stock, now you lose control, much higher risk because I'm making good or bad decisions, who knows, and the best you can do is probably borrow 50% of the value of that stock invest. So.
No.
Okay, now let's say that Scott's only willing to lend up to 75% of the value. Are you out of the deal? No. You bring in a different type of other people's money. You bring in co-venturers, partners. You put up part of the money, they put up part of the money, you make some other contribution. Let's say you tie up the deal. You have an intangible right to purchase this asset. You think in terms of forming a business. Your contribution is that intangible right, and perhaps part of the money.
Okay, so Scott, let me ask you this question. As a banker, Michael's an attorney, Scott's a banker. Do you want to lend money?
I want to lend money because, as we saw earlier, when I loan money, that's an asset to my bank. I also want to help you do what you want to do, but you have to help me get to that level and get me comfortable that you're able to borrow that money and pay me back, because that's really what I want. But I don't make a dime unless I make a loan to you. So I do want to loan money to you.
Right, and so many people are afraid to come and talk to you, right?
Absolutely,
right.
Absolutely.
So what Scott covers in this, how to get your banker to say yes, is how to prepare to see your banker. Because a banker's job is to say yes, because you don't make any money if you say no.
No, that's correct.
Okay, so let's have a hand for this gentleman. Thank you very much here. So, in conclusion, I want to say really quickly up here, I'll just show you how this whole thing works. If you're playing the game of Monopoly, this is what a banker does. This is Monopoly. You buy one greenhouse, it's putting cash flow. Monopoly teaches you this right here. The difference between cash flow, it took it to the next level of understanding this. I'll just show you how unrisky, if you're an active investor, is. Like, I don't like savings, stocks, bonds, mutual fund, because the risk is so high. My banker won't lend me money on it. This is a land deal that Kim and I just did a few months ago, and it's really quite a simple deal. And when somebody says things are risky, I don't know where the risk is. It's 10 acres of land. The price was $100,000. The reason I use this example is most people can afford $100,000. Okay. Now, The reason I bought this property is very simply when I looked at the listing agreement, again it goes to the words, it had the 2 letters MH on it. Now there's a lot of land around this thing. That what made this land more valuable than the rest? What made it more valuable was the words, MH. MH stands for manufactured housing. When I saw that, I dropped to my knees, again broke out the rosary beads and said thank you. Because the words made this more valuable than all the other land around it. Why that made it valuable is that because manufactured housing means, let's say I could break 10 acres into 50 lots, and I sell each lot for $25,000 each. The stepped up value on my property then is $1.25 million. How many people would pay $100,000 to make $1.25 million? That's how simple it is. Where's the risk? You know, and the reason I say it's an infinite return is the moment I found this deal, naturally my friends who can't find a deal wanted me to give me the money. So let's say I gave them the money, so I have zero money into it. I give them half the deal, which means I make about $500,000. So I make $500,000 on zero of my money. I use other people's money. And that means my return is infinite. Does that make sense to you guys here? Nothing to that. I don't know where the risk is. So when people say to you, investing is risky, generally it's one of these people over here who is not an active investor. This is done all day long. It took Kim and I about 20 minutes to find this thing. We saw it there, bam, done. It's not a big deal. It's not a Donald Trump deal. But $1 million is $1 million. You can still spend it that well. And the last thing, more real life examples, is this my wife Kim did, is that she found a piece of property not far from our house. I think Scott helped finance this one. It's a commercial building, and it was so undervalued that they wanted $8 million for it. Because it was undervalued, we borrowed 100% of the money. And the reason we borrowed it was very simply because every month this property put $30,000 a month cash flow in our pocket. Again, this is not a big deal, but $30,000 a month, you can live on that much. You know, it's not that bad. But the reason I use this deal as and we do about 1 or 2 of these a year, and it's not that hard to do. But the beauty of this is the banker gave us all the money here. It took us, like Michael says, 2 different levels of financing to do it. So we got 100% financing. Now, the reason I say this is to all the people who are the savers of the world, I ask this question: how long would it take you to save $8 million? And one of the reasons the rich are getting richer is because they know how to use other people's money or debt to move forward here. So it's not $8 million for the savers. A saver would have to save approximately $16 million to get this kind of loan, because the government's going to take 50% of it. The beauty of using debt financing or equity financing, things like this, is please listen to this, all you savers of the world. You're not going to get ahead by saving. A people who is borrowing and understands how to be a professional investor, it took my wife 2 weeks to find that money. And I asked the average saver of the world, how long will it take you to save that much money? For most people, $8 million or $16 million might take a number of years. Okay. And then the deal's gone. So the moment Kim found this deal here, she just tied it up, and that was the money. So the savers lose, the debtors win. And that's one of the big differences of learning how to use other people's money, how to have a friend like Scott McPherson or Michael Lecter on how to borrow money and things like this, because the savers are losing big time right now. So before we go into the next subject, I want to bring up my, one of my best friends, but also my investment partner in real estate, because you know the question I was asked during the break is, how does a person find a deal that cash flows? And I hear that a lot from people, especially now that people are coming into the market late. But there's still millions of deals around that you can find that cash flow. So before I answer that question, I'd rather bring up my business partner here, is author of The ABCs of Real Estate Investment. It's Ken McElroy. It's a big hand for Ken, please. This is his book. Why don't you give a little bit of your background before we go on?
Sure. Well, like many of you, I started off investing in one single-family home and condos primarily, and then eventually started buying larger and larger properties. And I've been in business for a little over 10 years. We have two construction companies, 2 management companies. We're developers. We have a short-term housing company and a realty company now that feeds our company, which we bought last year about $150 million worth of real estate for all different kinds of things. We develop it, we buy it, we enhance them. We're doing some condo conversions all over the West Coast. So primarily that's what I do now. I have a large presence throughout the West. We have about 250 employees now and offices throughout the West Coast. And my partner, Ross McAllister, primarily handles the construction, and then I handle the management operations.
So this is my question to Kenny, because so many people say, well, you know, how do you find a great deal? And the reason is that there's a difference between a passive investor and an active investor. Passive investors, because they're basically, either they cannot see the deal, or they wouldn't know a good deal if they saw it, or they're basically lazy. They just go to the broker, you know, the financial planner or somebody says, do you have an investment for me? And naturally they do. It's generally mutual funds, stocks, or bonds, and they're always readily available. Real estate is different because you have to really look, or even in stocks you have to look really hard. So my question to you is this, is how many deals do you look at a week?
We probably I personally look at least 30 a week, probably. I look at 4 or 5 a day, I bet. And they take me anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes each because I know what to look for.
Right. And how many of them are bad out of 30?
30.
And I think that's the biggest difference, is that, you know, to find this deal over here, I probably looked at 100 deals. And then one day I stumble along and there it is sitting there. I mean, this is what they call a no-brainer, right?
Well, part of looking at deals is part of your financial education and understanding all the different parts of the deal. And that's really where I get my education, as Robert does too. You know, some of them are land, some of them are retail, some of them are office, some of them are multifamily. And so through that process, you learn quite a bit when you make a phone call or ask questions. And then eventually you find something like this.
Yeah, or, I mean, we're looking constantly. That's what an active investor does. A passive investor just buys that junk that guy has to sell you. And most of the stuff is being sold by those financial planners. In my opinion, those mutual funds are junk. They will not make you money. They cost you money. That's why I'm not saying it's right or wrong, you guys. But I said, if you're going to be an active investor or a passive investor, you really need to make that decision. And active means you're constantly looking at deals, constantly analyzing them. It's 24/7. I mean, you're still running numbers in your head when you go to sleep, right?
Well, the great part about it is no matter where I am, even when I'm on vacation, I'm looking at deals, no matter what city I'm in, and it's a blast.
Yeah. And then I spent a lot of time in Australia, and I'm always looking. And no matter where I am throughout the world, China, Singapore, Canada, Europe, South America, Africa, they always say something. They always say, well, you can't do that here. No matter where I go. You can't do that here. And the reason they can't do it is because they're passive investors. They haven't trained their brain to see. No matter where I go, I'll find a deal that I can, you know, make it, improve it, work it, or do something like that. And that's the difference between an active and a passive investor. Anything else you want to say?
Well, yeah, that's exactly why I wrote this book, because as you'll see later on, that the fundamentals are really the same everywhere.
All over the world.
All over the world, they're the same. Income minus expenses minus debt is cash flow. It's the same no matter if you're in Hong Kong or you're in Phoenix, Arizona. It doesn't matter. And that's why I wrote this book, because it walks you through that process.
And one of the things I think is really funny is that, you know, because Kenny is, I mean, his business partners are like Lehman Brothers and Goldman and the big houses. As I said, the story of the father that gave those 3 boys the money. If you know how to multiply money, the banks of the world will give you the money. Is that correct?
Well, that's been the interesting part. Is my balance sheet, of course, has grown over time, but there's more money. The last deal that we did, actually, Scott helped us with it. We had 9 people bidding on our project to lend us the money.
How much was it? How much were they lending you?
I can't remember. I think it was somewhere around $50 million. And we were looking at the best deal for us. So we were looking at the terms and the rates and the payouts and things like that. as part of our financial model to decide who we wanted to accept money from.
But the reason they're giving you the money is because you know how to take $1 and turn it into 10, right?
That's right, and because we had the team behind us.
And that's really the skill a person has to learn. So many people want to do what Kenny does or what I do, but they're not willing to put the time in. They're passive investors, not active investors. And the thing that's even funnier is because Kenny's always in the marketplace. You know, we're in Scottsdale, Arizona, Kenny's developing this condo project, and everybody's crying the blues. I can't find a deal that cash flows, and Kenny has this condo conversion right on the main road in Scottsdale with the best piece of property in the Arizona area, and yours will cash flow, right, even if I buy them.
And we just bought it 2 weeks ago, 300 units.
Yeah. So one of the keys to finding great deals is you got to have friends in the industry. It's called insider trading. You know? Well, you know, in the stock market, that's illegal. In the real estate market, that's perfectly legal, right?
Absolutely.
So that's how I find deals. It's like, again, like I said to the gentleman, it's who your friends are, who you spend your time with. If you're spending time with people over here, like accountants and attorneys and all that who are non-investors, I think you're nuts. If you want to spend over here, that's where you find the deals are, because they always tell their friends first, right?
Well, and I think it's been mentioned before, there is so much money to be given to you if the deal makes financial sense. You need to decide how it makes financial sense. And that's why I wrote the book, because it walks you through what's a good deal, what's a bad deal.
Good. Give a big hand for Kenny, please. Thank you. So again, would you take 1 minute to discuss that? Look, ladies and gentlemen, there's millions and millions and millions of dollars right in front of you. But if you haven't trained your brain because you only have academic or professional education and no financial training, then you'll always be poor. You'll always think, well, it takes money to make money, or I don't have enough education, or I'm not rich, and all this stuff. Unless you change what's up here, nothing's going to change. Like I said, this project took probably 20 minutes to spot. It's a piece of raw land, and this one was right across the street from where Kim and I live. You know, it sat right there, and the bank gave us the money for it. 100% finance, put $30,000 a month in our pocket. And the property has gone up in value, but we don't really care, because all we really want is every month is $30,000. Why we want $30,000 a month? Is because then we're free. We don't have to work for the rest of our lives. But we can do this time and time again. But we're active investors, not passive investors. You guys got that? You got to pay your dues. Put in your homework. Or you can be lazy like most people and say, well, how come you can't tell me about that deal? If I find a great deal, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to buy it myself. Right? I mean, you should do the same thing. So please discuss that. You have to do the homework. Got that? Please discuss that really quickly, and then we'll move on.